Okay, let's do a podcast. Welcome to the SnarkSquad pod. Woo! That's what we're calling it, right?
Yes.
SnarkSquad pod? Okay. Mari, what is the SnarkSquad pod?
That's a great question, Nicole. I feel like that's a question that we will be answering over these next few weeks.
We should start with who we are.
Yeah, introductions.
Who are you?
Hi, I'm Marines. I am one half of the Snark Squad co-captains, I guess, and that's about it, right?
Yeah, that's about it. Thank you for still including me as a co-captain. I'm an absentee.
Yeah.
I'm the absentee parent.
I feel like once you've made a child, though, you're that child's like, you know.
That's true. That's true.
Mhm.
But I'm SnarkSquad's deadbeat mom.
Yeah. Introduce yourself.
My name's Nicole Sweeney, and yeah, I make stuff all over the internet. SnarkSquad.com is one of the things that we have made together, and it is a website where we consume all kinds of media and we recap it with all sorts of wonderful, smart, witty friends of ours. And we're best friends who really like to talk about media, and we're fucking millennials, so of course we're making a podcast.
I think, just part of Snark Squad has always been like this evolution of like, what can we talk about next and how?
Mm-hmm.
So, it started books and then went to TV and then, we did videos for a little while and we still do our own videos. And now we're like, yeah, why not? Let's do a podcast.
Part of it too, as we tried to cover more and more things, one of the things that we kept running into is that just the nature, the format of the recaps that Snark Squad does, like taking a thing and, writing a 3,000 word post on every episode of a TV show or every chapter of a book or whatever, is very limiting in terms of how much you can cover, because that shit takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
It's like not just consuming all of the media, but like producing the media that goes along with it. It's just very, very time consuming in that format, which greatly reduces the amount of stuff that you can cover.
And I think it also, we ran into like, not only did we want to do more things than we were able to do, but like, we can't be as timely as we want. Like, by the time we get around to like consuming it, writing it, it's like, oh yeah, that was like from 2 seasons ago. And you're like, damn it. So, for all of those reasons and probably more, we decided that having a podcast would be a great idea.
To that end, we've been writing the Veronica Mars season 3 recaps for like a year and a half now.
Right.
And like the beginning of that 3rd season is the Hearst rape arc. I feel like before we publish all of those episodes, all of the things that we've written are gonna need a once over because of the cultural events that have transpired.
I haven't even thought of it. Some of those recaps were written like way pre-election even.
Yeah.
Like that'll be fun to go back and see like these happier versions of ourselves.
So yeah, there's lots of reasons why it's gonna be great for us to start this podcasting thing as a new way to cover more ground
and have a lot of feelings. We have feelings about so many things that we should not be hindered by format.
Yes, this is a new frontier for feelings.
On that note, what are we having feelings about today, Nicole?
Today, we're going to have feelings about the 1st season of the CW TV series Riverdale. Actually, before we start talking about that, though, real quick, I do also want to say, just in case you're here and you just like want to learn about the podcast and like you don't give a shit about Riverdale, last housekeeping note, if you want to suggest other things for us to discuss that, maybe you do give a shit about, you can either find us on SnarkSquad.com. All of these podcast episodes will have a post on the website for you to, discuss, react, whatever. Or you can find us on Twitter at @snark_squad and just let us know what you think we should talk about next. Okay, Riverdale.
Riverdale was your idea.
It was my idea
thing that we could cover.
Uh-huh.
So why don't you why Riverdale? Why was that a thing where you were like, yep, we're going to watch it, we're going to talk about it?
So Riverdale is very much like right up my alley. I watched it on Netflix, so I didn't watch it as it was airing, but I watched it on Netflix, and I was like, "Yep, this is my jam." I'm very into soapy teenager trash, mostly because I'm very into coming of age stories in general, and so like that is generally teenager stories. This isn't quite that exactly, but yeah, I think this is like it's like fun to watch while also still having share of flaws and things like that that are worth discussing. And that's always a thing that we kind of struggle with, like with the recaps, is it has to be enjoyable, but like still have room for us to kind of poke at it a little bit.
Right. And we've
Uh,
definitely come in like encountered both extremes of that spectrum where it's like too good and we don't know what to say bad about it anymore. And then where it's like too bad and we're not having fun watching it. And it's almost
yes,
like too much to snark.
I'm
Like,
looking at you, Gotham.
yes. Which we rage quit. So I feel like this is a good balance of having like as you mentioned, stuff that you're enjoying, but still being like, campy enough that you can sit back
Yes,
and laugh.
yes.
It's funny too that you mentioned coming of age, and then we're like, well, this is not really that because I wrote down this is a coming of age story.
I
And
mean,
it
it is still definitely that. Yeah, yes, but I don't know that it would be. It's not primarily that, I guess, is mostly what I meant.
yes. So I'm curious, what did you know about the Archie comics before coming into Riverdale?
Basically nothing. I knew
Okay.
that Betty and Veronica were like a thing in like the pop culture. Like I knew that that was a thing. That's it. That is the full spectrum of knowledge that I possessed about the Archie Comics universe. How about you?
I feel like I remember seeing them in like supermarket lines and having read maybe through a few, but having no real knowledge or like retaining any of that. So I don't know if through like pop culture osmosis or whatever, I
Mm-hmm.
knew like Betty, Veronica, Archie, and Jughead, but like everything else from the comics, like no idea, no context or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
So I was going in pretty blind. I watched a couple episodes and I decided to pick up the first comic of like the reboot because they rebooted it in in
Mm-hmm.
2015, I think, just
Mm-hmm.
to like have a compare and contrast. But other than that, going into the show, I knew nothing.
Which I think is probably the way to do it, really.
Yeah.
So this show is I feel like if I were just from, like looking at images of it, my assumption would be something far far lighter, and my rough understanding is that like the way people describe this is a very dark twist on on the comics.
Yeah.
So this story, the season 1, we're only going to be talking about season 1, but the story of season 1 begins with well, it begins with some wonderful narration by Jughead,
Yes.
uh, who tells us the story throughout. And the first season story is the story of the death of Jason Blossom, the murder of Jason Blossom. And yeah, we meet the sort of the core four of Archie, Jughead, Betty, and Veronica in the first episode. So in the first episode, we learn that Archie spent his summer having an affair with his teacher, which we'll
Right.
get to in due time. Uh, Betty is in love with Archie, and is finally going to tell him, but he's not interested, and he's right when he says he's never been good enough for Betty because Betty's way too good for him, and that's
Amen. Yeah.
Archie's not good enough for either one of them. Whatever. Uh,
We'll get to that too.
Jughead is brooding in a diner, telling us the story. That's really all we know at the beginning. Jughead, he's got a slower burn,
Right.
and Veronica is just arriving in the town of Riverdale from New York because her very wealthy father, has been arrested for lots of shady financial dealings, and so now her mom is from Riverdale, and the only property that they had left was her apartment in Riverdale, and so they are starting a new life, and yeah, that's where we begin. Does that sum it up?
Yeah, that pretty much sums it up. And Nicole and I haven't talked about this at all. So she's watched it. She watched it before I did. I watched
Hmm.
it for the purposes of like doing this whole thing, and we have not talked about this at all. And I will say
Yes.
that after watching that pilot, I watched it with a friend, and I like turned to her and I was like, meh. And she was, this friend was a fan, obviously, because I was like, "Want to watch Riverdale?" And she's like, "Oh my gosh, yeah." So, but after that pilot and like that introduction of what you just laid out, like
Hmm.
I wasn't really sold.
Hmm.
But then I turned to her, I was like, "Okay, let's play another one." And I think we watched like four that night. So you really at the beginning of that, you know, you get everybody's introduction, and a lot of it is very tropey.
Hmm.
Um,
Yes.
but I don't know, it builds from that moment. So when you get these introductions and you do have Jughead like brooding in a diner and Veronica like sassing into town and
Uh-huh.
the best friend in love with the guy who's and the you know the love is unrequited and they make jokes about how he got hot over the summer like all that stuff is really interesting to me because they almost commit so fully to some of these tropes and like build off of there. So you don't feel like it's so tropey as everything goes on.
Yeah.
But in
Yeah.
episode one, like they committed.
I like that too, though, because of the fact that it is built on this existing property that like a
Yep.
lot of people know a great deal about, and sort of
Yep.
saying, okay, so here are the like the cutouts that you know maybe know something about,
Right.
and like meet your collection of cardboard cutouts, and then we're gonna spend the season like deconstructing them a little
Deconstructing,
bit.
right.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I
which I
feel like
love.
when it comes to, you know, talking about like not knowing anything about Archie and then going into this series, I think really you don't need any kind of background information. I
No.
think what these characters prove to be are just like an entry point into the
Mhm.
story,
Mhm.
and so you really need none of that background knowledge. And all it is really like an introduction. Like here are some characters you kind of already know, and then go from there.
Yes. So I really want to start with the point at which Mari almost rage quit, as I found on Twitter. Fucking Miss Grundy.
Yep. And not only Miss Grundy, but Miss Grundy because she's a teacher who we find out right from the beginning is in a relationship with Archie. So it's like the
Hmm.
student teacher relationship.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yep. We have a lot of feelings about that. You
Yep.
can read all of our Pretty Little Liars recaps. Uh, the endless rage over Ezra Fitz. Like I genuinely enjoy the like hot mess that is Pretty Little Liars, but like every episode, that was my like constant war with that show. Like I
Yeah.
will forgive it everything else that is trash about it, but making Ezra fucking Fitz an endgame like romantic plot is
Right.
just how dare you?
Yep.
How dare you? I have invested. I invested so many hours of my life into that garbage fucking show.
Yep.
Kept coming back, and yet for
You
all of
couldn't
that,
escape him. Yeah.
yeah, I just I need to cut myself off because I will go off on a like 20-minute rant about Ezra Fitz. But this show, this show,
As like a like an opposite to that though, like I feel like as much as I was raging on Twitter at that point, which was like episode 4, I think I
uh huh,
reached like full rage moment, like my full rage reached the moment where they cut it off. So it really was a show building you to that point
yes,
where they took you right to the point where you're like I hate this and then they end it.
they ended it.
So
Yeah.
that was pretty well done, and I have to say that as much as I hated the relationship, I don't feel like the show ever portrayed it as something positive like they did with like Ezra and
It's definitely not like Ezra levels of bad, and they clearly like they ended it. The other adults clearly recognized that this was a serious problem, and like even Miss Grundy routinely recognizes that this is bad and shouldn't be
right.
happening. It's definitely better, but it bothers me a little bit that like for over the course of the entire season, like that Archie forever views this as a great tragedy. Like
Right.
it's never they never grapple with the fact that something was
That.
done to Archie, right?
Yeah.
Like, I
Yeah.
don't know, that piece of it bothers me.
So yes, I agree, but I think that fits more into, well, not to take away the importance, but I feel like that fits more into Archie being kind of an idiot,
Sure.
and not to like blame him for whatnot, but also this
But
idea.
Archie's an idiot. This
Yeah,
is
right.
Archie's a fucking idiot.
He's kind of an idiot. And then also a lot of the things in the show are dealt that way, in which
Mhm.
like they throw these things out there and then I feel like they're never addressed again. And Miss Grundy is definitely one of those things.
That's true. Yes.
And I mean, it's small things like why was Polly being made to drink milkshakes every day while she was at Thornhill? I'm serious, that's still bothering me. I don't understand. To like, I don't know, bigger things like even like storylines like Archie dates very briefly one of the Pussycats, Val, and I feel
Uh-huh.
like that never has a conclusion. It's just like I don't know, it fades out and nobody ever mentions it again. At least in season 1.
Yeah.
So
There are definitely a lot of dropped threads. I will say, so we're not talking about season 2 at all, but my Miss Grundy grievance, there's the pin that I'm gonna put in that is just there's a season 2, it continues, and I hate
okay.
it. That's all.
Okay.
The relationship doesn't continue, but the way in which it is
It's
dealt with.
portrayed. Okay.
Yes, yes.
I will not
Yeah.
look forward to watching
Yeah. It's I
that.
mean, it's quick, there's not a lot, but it's enough that I was like, God fucking damn it. Like
Right.
I was happy for you to have just abandoned that thread and
Yeah.
never looked back. Uh so yeah. But yeah, that is definitely a thing that they do. There's a lot of just like weird, which is interesting. Like it is an interesting thing to you have this mystery show
Yeah.
and like because it is also a teenager CW show, they play with that a lot, like the fact that they can lead you down these like weird alleys that don't have to have a payoff.
Right.
Because like whatever.
Because at the end of the day, and I will say that what got me invested first before I was like sold on everything else really was the mystery at the heart of the
Yeah.
show. Like I kept watching. My friend was like, "Well," after I was like, "Meh," she was like, "Well, do you want to keep watching?" I was like, "Well, yes, because now I have to know who killed Jason Blossom."
Uh-huh.
So that's what hooked me first. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I would say that this show is kind of a murder mystery as an afterthought. Like it is a coming of age story. It is like the teen drama, and then also it has a murder mystery.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's why some of those threads are kind of like, like it's, go away into the sunset, and we never talk about them again.
Yeah, doesn't matter. Does not matter. Yeah, that's yes, that is true. And it's also yes, you're right about it being probably a coming of age story first and foremost, and I retract my earlier dismissiveness of that. Because like part of that is it's part of how the mystery is a device through which to tell the coming of age story.
Right.
Like it's sort of necessary for them to tell the coming of age story that all of the adults are at least vaguely incompetent. And like
Yes.
and part of the point though is like yes, it is absurd that these teenagers are the ones who are solving all the mysteries and whatever. But like that's this particular coming of age story is partially about agency and and realizing their own sort of capacity and whatnot. So yes, it's just plot garbage to have the adults be incompetent to a certain extent, but it's also like actively useful for telling a coming of age story
I
that you
agree.
have these incompetent adults.
And I think that it's interesting that, a lot of people will describe this as like a dark, twist on an established thing, and you
Mhm.
really do have all of these like dark twisty undertones, but at the end of it, and it's funny that you mentioned like the promotional material, I feel like the heart of it is not as dark, and because I think that part of their coming of age is them trying to figure out, so like how to be good people. You have Veronica not wanting to be the mean girl anymore,
Uh-huh.
and you
Uh-huh.
have Betty who is like the perfect one trying to like battle inner darkness
Uh-huh.
basically, and you
Yeah.
have Archie, who's kind of an idiot, but he's trying to, like, when he has his
He
best
tries.
moments, yes, when he has his best moments, it's because he's doing, like, the right thing. And
Yeah.
I feel like Jughead is, in a lot of ways, by being our, like, narrator, he's kind of like the moral compass of, like,
Mhm.
sticking to the truth and finding. So at the end of the day, they're all trying to be good people and do good things, which is a
Mhm.
great kind of story to tell on the backdrop of a murder.
Yeah.
So because everything is so shady, like I love that every time that anybody is mentioned, like, oh, that person was here, he has a motive. Like everyone has a motive, everybody is implicated, and yet our core four, what they're really trying, what they're in the process of discovering, is like their sense of goodness and sense of like right and wrong.
Yeah, that is, I hadn't really thought about it that way until you put it that way, but
Hmm.
it makes me love this show so much more. Oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
Such a good thought.
There's two things that I don't want to lose track of here. One is like
Mhm.
the murder mystery itself and how you thought that all went down, but also the
Uh-huh.
parents.
You're the parents. Okay, let's start with the parents. Cause
Okay.
I watched the show on Netflix originally. Me and my boyfriend got back from a trip, and we were like, okay, let's just like watch a show. And this was Riverdale was the only thing we could agree on, and so we watched, and it was a similar thing of like we watched one episode and we ended up watching like four.
Okay.
And then I had to finish it by myself because he wanted to watch it way too slowly,
Okay.
at an unacceptable pace. Um, I needed to find out who killed Jason Blossom,
Same.
obviously. But yeah, the parents, I did before recording go back and rewatch the first episode, and it gave me just like renewed fuck these parents feelings. At some point in this episode, Betty's parents are discussing, the murder like on the bank of the river, and Betty's mom is like, if he really is dead, I hope he suffered in his final, moments, whatever. Like fuck him. And
Hmm.
I just knowing the whole story at the end of it, like what kind of sick fucking individual
Right.
says that about a teenager? Like
Yes.
what the like I- they're the sort of reveal about why they hate him, like I get it, I to a certain, like it's petty and small, but like I get them not liking him, but that is a level that
Right.
I cannot wrap my head around.
So a lot of the times when I don't even care that this show goes like balls to the wall with some of this stuff, like the murders and the kids are investigating, and it's unbelievable, but I kind of love that aspect of it,
Yeah.
that it really fully commits. But most of the moments that I'm like, question mark, like, is this really happening right now?
Yeah.
Involves the parents and moments like that, and just like the weirdness of like the Blossom family, like pretty much anything that ever happened at Thornhill, like
Yeah.
I don't know, that outer level of how these parents are treating the children, or how like the mayor and the sheriff are handling
Uh-huh.
everything, like that almost is more upsetting to me
Yeah.
than the like the disbelief over kids investigating a murder.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Kids investigating the murder, whatever, it's fine. But yeah,
right.
the degree to which the parents are shuffled around
Yeah.
as plot service,
Right.
that was definitely very exasperating. It was just like I can't you can't wrap your head around it, around like what to make of these parents, especially going back to the mystery. It is very difficult to contextualize any of the like the pieces in the mystery when none of the parents are actually like clearly defined characters. Like
Not at
they
all.
are they are whatever the episode needs them to be that week,
Absolutely. And
basically.
and I feel like I mean I was just thinking about Veronica's mom, Hermione, and
Mhm.
sorry, Betty's mom, Alice, and how at the very beginning I really hated Alice, and towards the end of the season I had more sympathy for her.
Mhm.
And at the
Mhm.
beginning I thought Hermione was like a good mom, and then by the
Mhm.
end I was like, what the hell? Like,
Yeah,
what is
yeah.
by the time that she basically insinuates that Veronica should sleep with Archie to have some kind of control over Archie's dad's like
Yeah.
decision about his business, I was
Yeah.
like, girl,
Ooh.
what are you doing
Ooh.
right now?
Ooh,
Yeah.
damn.
And so I almost was thinking, well, they flip flop, but really what's happening is what you're describing is that whatever the episode needed, or if there was the murder needed a suspect, that's how
Mhm.
the parents
So
acted.
this week, a parent is going to do something shady because we
Right.
need to do a new, to add a new like twist to the mystery.
And then, then it's so all over the place because you have Archie's dad, who's I'm
Mhm.
forgetting all the parents' names right now, but
Luke
he
Perry.
Luke Perry, you have Archie's dad, Luke Perry, and he's like a consistent good dad. Like
Yeah.
I feel like
He's
he's
an idiot, but
probably
yeah.
yes,
He's
yeah,
he's he's like Mama Marin. He's the Ashley Marin of
yes,
this
yes,
show.
yes,
Good heart, tries real hard, real dumb.
real dumb. But I mean, and that makes sense because look
His
at his
son. Yeah.
offspring. Yeah, right.
Yeah. It's not
So
Archie's fault, I guess, is really the takeaway here is that Archie had no hope.
none at all. I even forgot what we were talking about because we started talking about Luke Perry, and it just when I realized it was Luke Perry, it was like a whole moment.
The casting choices, so many great little casting the the former teen dream
Yeah.
parents in here. Skeet Ulrich, I had a like weird phase when I was like 10 where I was super into Scream. Don't ask me why. I hate
Okay.
horror movies now, but 10-year-old Nicole, I think it was like I thought I was cool because I liked just like watching a scary movie. Probably maybe, but Skeet Ulrich is like one of my early celebrity crushes. So Jughead's dad.
Yep.
Uh, I was like, oh hey, good.
Which is
Yeah.
another one who's like swinging back and forth from like
Uh
bad to
huh.
good, and
Uh huh.
uh towards the end, then they play up the whole like he's loyal to his people kind of thing. So
Yep. Yep. Yeah. But even but he's like clearly out of the picture for Jughead, Jughead's living like above a like in the projection room of a drive-in movie theater.
right,
So clearly his dad sucks, but
right.
but by the end we're meant to feel some considerable sympathy for him, and it's yeah.
He gets implicated in the murder, and
Mhm.
then you find out that no, he didn't like murder the kid, but he did like hide the body and like just
Yes.
destroy other evidence. And
Uh-huh.
I liked that the show was still like, okay, you're not the murderer, but you still did really bad things, and
Yeah,
like
you
so.
still have to be in jail.
You're right.
You don't get to be a free man now.
Right. And he says it too. He says, I'm not all bad, and but I haven't been all good, and I have to answer for the things that I've done. So I feel
Mhm.
like it hits these notes where you're like, yes. And then the next moment you have like, the Blossom mom, Cheryl's mom, telling her that
Mhm.
she has to go to school, even though they just found out like who her brother's murderer is. And like
Yeah.
she's so awful to Cheryl. Like, so
Yeah.
it was just all over the place with the parents.
Cheryl as well. Cheryl is also a character. Cheryl's whole character is being extra.
Yes.
Uh,
She never had a subtle moment.
she does not do subtlety, but also similarly kind of shuffled around as the plot demands. In the second season, she's become a bigger player, so she's gotten to have more a little bit. But yeah, she's another much like the parents. It's just like well, we would like you to go do something absurd now. Here's
Yes.
a go
Here's
forth.
a candelabra. And go.
Yes.
So, as we're talking about characters, I wrote down some things that I wanted to hear from you about. So,
Okay.
I'm curious now, who are your favorite characters? Because we've talked about the parents being useless and Archie being the worst.
Yeah.
So, who are your favorites?
Betty's my number one. I just love her so much. I love her. She's so smart and good, and she solves everything. She's better than everyone. Veronica is my second favorite. Veronica is also quite great as their friend. I like their friendship. I think I mostly like Veronica for her proximity to
To
Betty,
Betty.
who is above and beyond my chosen one.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. Cheryl's fun. Her extraness is an enjoyable like presence. Like I like that she's there. Like I think she provides a little bit of what I think Mona occasionally brought to at least later Pretty Little Liars, but like better. Like she's just like kind of absurdist and fun, and like in the way that like you were saying that like this show just sort of commits very aggressively to every all of the choices that it makes.
Right.
I like the fact that they commit so aggressively to Cheryl's extra-ness, and to Jughead's emo-ness. Basically, all of the teenagers except for Archie are great, but but Betty is above and beyond the best one.
So I have this thing where I hate when any any character, but it's usually a male character tells a female like, "No, you're too good for me," or like
Oh,
other or
mhm.
otherwise like self-selects out of the
Uh-huh.
relationship that way, like I'm protecting you, like blah blah. Because I feel like it takes away agency.
Yeah,
If I don't care, like if I want to be with a shitty person, that's my choice. Like you don't get to
right.
decide that for me. So
Yes,
that was
yes.
my
You
feeling.
can decide that you don't want to be with me, but
Right.
you don't get to tell me who is good enough for me.
Right.
I make that call.
Yes. So I hate that. So and I hated that moment between
Yes.
Archie and Betty until like 3 or 4 episodes later where I was like, shit, she is too good for you. Never gonna happen, buddy. I fell hardcore in love with Betty. I think she's such a great character. And she could have fallen into this like trope of being like the girl next door, but I don't know what it is about like her wide-eyed commitment to like
Hmm.
truth and justice that just I think is
I
the
love it
heart
so
of the
much.
story. Yep.
Yes. I
Where
just love it. Wide eyed, yes, her wide eyed commitment to truth and justice. That is, that's it. That's, I love it. I'm here for it.
yeah. Everybody else to me is like tied for second except for Archie, who's third. So those are my rankings. Like,
Uh-huh.
yeah, I don't really care much about anybody else besides Betty.
Besides Betty, it's clearly the best one. Yeah, so we're in agreement. We
Yep.
have consensus on Betty's superiority. Yeah, Betty's the best one. Don't at me. That's it. Okay, we've been pretty gushing. What are some of the things that you really just did not like? Like what did you hate most about this experience?
There wasn't a lot, to be honest. There wasn't a ton. I feel like overall, as much as we can pick on like the smaller things. So, I mean, a big thing we already talked about, which was I think the whole Miss Grundy thing was a misstep.
Mhm.
I think I read somewhere, which don't at me again if this is not true, but I read somewhere that they kind of stopped that whole relationship thing abruptly because it wasn't doing well with test audiences.
Yeah, well, thank you,
So,
test
right.
audiences.
And I feel like that whole beginning was a misstep because they wrote it, but then a misstep of how they didn't really address it. I think part
Mhm.
of the reason that Archie wasn't like, I mean, he doesn't like Veronica, that's fine, but I think that part of it was because he was so into Miss Grundy, and then
Mhm.
they just kind of move on from that, and Archie starts dating around, but they never addressed that. I don't know. So
Yeah.
that was like
Yes.
one of my main sticking points where I was just like, okay, that this show got that part wrong.
Yeah. That is my single biggest grievance like period with the
Yeah.
show for sure.
Otherwise, I really enjoyed myself and I watched it very quickly. We talked about like a lot of the stuff surrounding the murder mystery itself. I feel like falls into some trappings, and we talked about how it shuffles around the characters, their motivations, and doesn't really stick to the character like how you think they would act in service of the mystery itself and to
Uh-huh.
make people seem suspicious or shady or
Yes.
whatnot. So
Yes. Yes.
there's a lot of things like that, but like big glaring things where I can be like, this sucked. I don't know. I don't think that I have one.
Yeah. Oh man. Wow. That genuinely that surprises me. Well, I
Okay.
feel like it's this our inaugural episode of the Snark Squad pod is like a good sort of tone setting thing because I feel like in general, like I am much more accepting of trash.
Yeah.
I am much more like willing to be like, yeah, oh yeah, like yeah, I hear you that X, Y, and Z are terrible, but it was fun.
Yeah.
And you're like, ah, so that's kind of our
I didn't
dynamic.
really have fun.
Because of how it was trash.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you don't have a list, I feel much better about how I don't either. Yeah, the Miss Grundy thing is real. I mean, that did genuinely like upset me. I had sort of a similar. Some friends had told me that that was a thing,
Hmm.
um, and they were like, "Yeah, but it's resolved well, quickly and well," is what they said. And I
Yeah.
was like, first of all, it took like 4 episodes in a 13 episode season, so I was like, I don't know if that or 4 or 5. That's not quick. Uh, first of all, and second of all, it was not dealt with fucking well.
No. It
But
was dealt with swiftly,
yeah,
but which is a sort of like, okay, satisfaction, but it wasn't done well.
So that's we didn't really hate much of anything
I
here.
feel like, if we were recapping this episode by episode, it would be different because I feel like I would
Yeah.
have a lot more little things to nitpick each episode. But because we're
Yes.
talking about it like high level season one, like
Mhm.
glaring things that I could say right now, these were the worst. I can't think of
Yeah.
any. But sitting there watching each episode, I could have been like, oh yeah, that's stupid. Ha,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Sure. Yes. And that is also partially the nature of recapping, of course,
yes.
which you and I have discussed at great length, but like there's being explicit about now that there is just that is a very, very different thing. Like watching a show and like breaking it down scene by scene. Then this happened, and this happened, and this happened. You become much more, actually, so this is something else. This is another like a smaller nitpick, but like, I don't know. A thing that I noticed kind of throughout the first season, and again, like confirmed rewatching the pilot, the Blossom twins are supposed to be 17. Our core four is, we are informed, are sophomores. Cheryl should be older than the rest of them,
Right.
and is clearly like retconned into not being that. Come like the second season, she's
Oh,
clearly
gotcha.
the same. I don't know, whatever. But that was a thing that like bothered me throughout too. Like especially Cheryl's cattiness with Betty. I was
Yeah.
always like, you're like a senior talking to a sophomore. Like, what the fuck are you doing? Like,
Right.
why?
Oh, right, because
uh,
she should have been the same age as Polly and
uh
Jason,
huh.
and Polly was
Yes.
18 at the time
Yes.
that all of this was happening. Oh, well, I didn't even think to be
Yes.
annoyed about that, so thank you.
Yeah, 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 that annoyed me, and then because then I just rewatched it too, and like near the end, when like Jughead and Archie have their little moment at the diner, like Archie drives home, he's like 17, he was 17, what was he doing with his life and whatever, which
Yeah.
that's a stupid, whatever, but and so like that kind of stuff when you are recapping a show like comes up very, very aggressively in a
Yes,
way that is different when you're like binge watching a series. Yeah, it's a different consumption experience.
absolutely.
Okay, so what did you love? What was your like favorite thing?
I gotta say that at the end of the day, I said that this is what hooked me, and I think it's what brought me along through the whole series, and I think
Mhm.
it was the murder mystery for me.
Mhm.
Not that it was necessarily an amazing mystery, but I liked the way that you had the characters all dealing with their own personal issues. They would come
Mhm.
together and deal with their friend issues, and in the back of
Mhm.
everything else, they're like, "Oh yeah, like someone got murdered." So I feel like I feel like that elevated this into like
Uh-huh.
it reminded me a lot of like Veronica Mars because she did a lot of the same thing. Like she had her, her school drama, she had her like mystery of the week, and then she had the whole Lily Kane murder. So I feel like when you
Right.
have a show that exists on those multiple platforms, um,
Mhm.
I don't know, I thought it kept it interesting.
Yeah, the sort of multi-tiered
Yeah,
storytelling.
yes.
Yeah, my favorite thing is Betty Cooper. I just really love Betty
Oh,
Cooper.
well, duh. Well, Betty is the one who's like basically bringing along the whole mystery and like
That's true. Our answers are the
so.
same, essentially. Yeah. uh,
What did you
uh,
think of like the whole murder mystery and how it was solved?
I loved the way they told that story. Like I was gripped to the mystery
Yeah,
the whole time. I was
yeah,
constantly like, "Oh shit." Like with each new
yeah.
twist was exciting and like yeah, yes, a lot of it is sort of kind of absurd, unbelievable storytelling, but like it was very fun and engaging storytelling.
I agree.
Uh so I had a blast with that murder mystery.
I was thinking about this in terms of being like a Veronica Mars thing. And one
Mhm.
thing that really stuck out to me was that with Veronica, we got all those flashbacks to Lily.
Mhm.
And Lily it was a character. We
Yeah,
got to know
yeah.
her and we really understood Veronica's motivation for trying to solve this. That was her best friend and she had like a personal connection to that whole thing. We don't
Mhm.
know who the hell Jason Blossom
Nope.
is. We
Nope.
have no idea and I don't know if that like we learn more about him in season 2 or if they have any plans, but we get stories as to what happened to him and what led him to being murdered, but we don't know if any of them are true. We don't know
Yeah.
what kind of person he was. He never says a line, I think, in the
Yeah.
whole thing. We never hear him talk. We don't know what he sounds like. We have no idea
He
who this
does in the
person
very
is
beginning, the flashback to when he and Cheryl are
in the boat.
in the boat when she
Yes.
asks if he's afraid and he says no.
And
Uh
I think that's pretty
that's
much the
probably
only
his that's
time,
it.
yeah,
Yep.
that so I don't know, it added some like darkness to the story. And it I okay, so to compare it to something else. So like Pretty Little Liars, right?
Mhm. Yep.
It's
Mhm.
trash. And part of
Yep.
the reason that it got so much worse as it continued is that it should have been resolved and it never was. And it just
Right.
kept like compounding. It was like who's A, and it was like, oh, A and the A team and AD, and I don't even know what, like it
Yeah.
kept like compounding. So I
Yeah.
feel like that we got an answer to one mystery at the end of season 1, but they opened it up to like this larger also thing happening in the town. So I
Yeah.
appreciated that. Like, I don't know. I think it just, for as much as it wasn't a great or a perfect murder story, I liked what it did as part of the larger like construction of the episodes.
Yes, yes, yeah. They flowed very well, and I think it benefited from being like a half a 13 episode season. Like
Yes.
that was like the correct amount of time to tell this
Yes.
story. Nothing felt like filler,
Mhm.
which was good. Yeah, it was a very well structured story. Okay, so that's Riverdale. We had sort of talked about we've kind of talked about this a lot throughout, but one of the things that we talked about before recording was kind of doing like a tying this back to other things that we've recapped on Snark Squad. It's like maybe a way that we wrap this up. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yep, let's do it.
Okay. Question mark?
Yeah.
Let us know on Twitter or sourcesquad.com
You
if
can
this is a
at
good
me
idea.
about this.
Please, please do.
So, I mean, we mentioned some stuff throughout, and I think part of this whole appeal of the story is that it makes a lot of references itself. I think
Yeah.
it's super aware of the genre it's in. I think the characters make references all throughout it. So I think it is very much tied, like it's very self-aware. But it
Mhm.
reminded me a lot in the beginning of Dawson's Creek,
Mhm.
especially
Hmm.
because it had the Dawson, Joey, Jen like
Yeah, yeah,
moving
yeah,
into
yeah.
town, like slow
Uh-huh.
motion shot, and
Uh-huh.
Pacey would be Jughead.
Uh-huh.
So
Ooh. Yeah,
it
yeah.
had that like core four where Dawson is the worst, also,
Yeah,
just
yep.
like
Yep.
Archie. Like he's supposed
Only
to be
they
the center, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And only they didn't spend, they didn't waste an eternity on Dawson Joey.
Yes.
They buried that quickly, which was
and
good.
and even in season 1 they had like Pacey and the teacher, that whole storyline, and
Oh
Pacey
yeah,
is
that's
Jughead. Or well,
right.
Pacey was Jughead,
Yeah,
but at least it was
sure.
like the Archie, So
Yeah.
I don't know. It had a lot of those same similarities to me. Small town, that whole
Uh-huh.
idea, the gay best friend. I don't know. It just had a lot of
Yeah.
tie-ins.
But like culturally situated, right? So like that was,
Yes.
that was Dawson's was of its time, and this is very much of this time too.
Right.
That's true. Yes, I had not thought of that. So we also talked about this repeatedly, but obviously Pretty Little Liars is like the main thing that came up for me. Like I was describing the show to Phoenix, and like that I was like, it's the new Pretty Little Liars.
Right.
But it's interesting because also like some of what we were just talking about with Dawson's Creek, it's like it is aware of where it fits, and has adjusted itself accordingly. Like it's learned the lessons of things that came before,
Right. Yeah.
and so yeah, it's a lot like Pretty Little Liars, but fixed in many ways that I appreciate. Yeah, like you said, like the mystery is clearly like contained and it's resolved, and they had a clear direction, and then it's solved.
I was gonna say next Veronica Mars, which we've mentioned, but I think for me the crossover there are the voiceovers.
Oh yeah.
So that was as soon as I heard Jughead, I was like, oh, Veronica Mars voiceover. And then also having like the what is the name of the gang, the Serpents or whatnot.
Yeah,
It,
yeah,
it
yeah.
reminded me a lot of like the Fitzpatricks and the PCHers,
Uh-huh.
which were like a big part of the Veronica Mars like story. And then
Yes.
also the whole one episode, which was a great episode about the slut shaming in the book. It
Yeah.
reminded me a lot of a similar thread, which then got continued in season three of like the rapes on campus and having the like book where they were keeping score and all of that.
Uh-huh.
Hmm.
Yeah. Lots of, yes, very similar stories.
Yep.
I think they actually refer, I don't, it might have been in the second season, but somebody actually refers to Betty as like, it's like, what are you doing, Veronica Mars kind of thing too. And I'm
I think, and they do
my
like,
heart,
I
my
know you're like,
heart.
yeah. And I think Veronica Mars has an episode called Betty and Veronica.
Yes, it does. It
Yeah.
does. It's the episode where Veronica goes to the other high school and poses as a student.
Oh yes.
She poses as a student named Betty.
Yes.
uh,
I've got one more tie-in.
okay. Oh,
Um,
okay.
the OC.
Okay.
And this is specifically for one little thing, and it's the student lounge and how they're all sitting around in the student lounge in like that big couch.
Yeah. Yes. That is
Do you
very,
remember?
very
Like they
OC.
had, yeah, they had. I don't know if you've seen it in other places, but I imagine I like tied it immediately to the OC, because we complained about it there too. Like who has like a student lounge and a huge couch in the middle of the high school? But that's like
Yeah.
where all the important conversations happened on Riverdale. Like they
Yeah.
would be like, "Oh my
Yes.
God, but my dad just got arrested, and this about the murder," and you're like, "Why are you on a couch at school?" And I remember yelling that same thing at the OC. So that was my last
Yeah.
little.
Which, to that end, that is also so. Like the OC is like aggressively and intentionally about a group of very wealthy teenagers, right? Like
Yeah,
that's
that's
what it's
whole
doing.
thing. Yeah.
And I this is like a very very not really even spoiler, but for season 2 that they introduce the other high school. I think they mention at the end of the first
Yeah, the
season that
South
or that
Side. Yeah.
Jughead, yeah,
Yes.
yes, that Jughead's gonna have to go to Southside High, right? Yeah,
Right.
so like it's I don't know if I feel like this is probably more of an accident that they sort of lucked into, but
Yeah.
like Riverdale High is like the bougie high school in
Yeah.
town. Uh,
So they have
so
couch. What you're saying is that I didn't go to a bougie high school,
yeah.
and I don't know about the couches in the student
Oh,
lounge.
I also never went to a bougie high school, but from what I've learned on TV, if you're rich, your public high school has couches. That's what I'm
Got
saying.
it. Okay, well, silly me.
And I have no experience to the contrary, so until I've lived opposing evidence, I'm gonna keep believing that all rich kids go to public high schools with I guess the OC high school was not public. That was a private
Oh no,
school.
that one was private. Yeah.
Anyway, this is not important. Well, see, now that it's a private high school, you see it all makes sense,
It
right?
does.
It's perfectly logical that they have
Listen, all I wanted to bring up was the couch, okay? Those other ones that I mentioned were legit. This was just really about the couch.
It's just about teenagers, high schools with couches.
Yeah.
Good. Well, on that note, I guess we did it. I think we just recorded our first episode of our podcast. Dang.
Yay. Look at us
Well,
go.
look at us go. Please share your thoughts and feelings. Again, you can find us on Twitter at snark_squad or at snarksquad.com. You can find me at Sweeney Says on Twitter.
You can find me at My Name is Marines on Twitter as well.
And we'll see you next week.